Hey there, I'm Alex Kidman, and this right here, well, this is the Xiaomi Poco F7 Ultra. Let's get into the review. But before we start, a couple of ground rules. Xiaomi sent me this particular model of the Poco F7 Ultra used in the review. That gets them a review, nothing else. They have no editorial oversight, no sponsorships, nothing like that. Everything that I'm about to say is my own honest opinion. I know that gets boring, but I do feel like disclosure is really important and something that way too many people just gloss over. Also, at the time of recording this review, I do not have a solid price for what this phone is going to cost here in Australia, or even, in fact, if the local distributors, Xiaomi Tech, are going to range it. What I've been told is that it should sell for around US $650. So taking that as rough conversion and adding in our local taxes and a bit of shipping, I'm treating this as though it's about an Australian $1,100 to $1,200 phone. Now, obviously, that pricing could vary, so please keep that in mind when you consider the rest of the things I'm about to say about this phone. Now, let's get back into the review. The Poco F7 Ultra is built around a 6.67-inch, 120Hz AMOLED display with a top resolution of 3200 by 1440, which is nice and sharp, though it's worth noting that out of the box and after setup, by default, it'll instead display at 2400 by 1080 to save a bit of battery power. If you want the sharpest display, it'll cost you a little in battery life terms, but you have to enable it in settings. And while you're in there in settings, you may also want to tinker with the refresh rate. And here I'll give Xiaomi its due, because a lot of manufacturers with variable refresh rate screens will give you maybe one or two choices, like maybe here's 60Hz, here's dynamic, or here's just 60Hz or just 120. Xiaomi goes a bit further, so you can have 60Hz for everything, you can have 120Hz for everything, they have a dynamic setting, and they have a per app setting. I love having that level of flexibility. I appreciate it when phone manufacturers open up their hardware that way, but a little more on that later. The Poco F7 Ultra comes in just two colours. There's a very vibrant yellow and a considerably more plain black, and obviously that's the colour that Xiaomi has sent my way. This isn't a phone, however, with just the one single colour on the back. You get a rather pleasing glossy black top over a more plain matte black base, which would do some work to reducing fingerprint pickup had I not slapped it into its case pretty much as soon as I'd finished unboxing it. Yeah, that's better. Maybe not as pretty, but protected, and that's the point of a case ultimately. I do think if you're going to spend serious money, even the kind of serious money we're talking about here, then a case is a really simple, cheap bit of insurance. Get the case damaged when you drop it, and your phone is still fine. I reckon that's worth paying for. It's also kind of refreshing to note that they're just called out as black and yellow finishes. They're not space black, they're not spectral black, amazing black, sea black, universal black, forest black, or anything of the sort, because those kinds of marketing prefixes really don't mean anything. And look, yeah, maybe that's just something that bothers me. I'm digressing now. Let's get back to the review. The Poco F7 Ultra is essentially sort of based off a phone designed for the Chinese market that Xiaomi makes, the Xiaomi K80, which means it more closely mirrors what you're likely to see in the premium space in that country, for better and worse. So, for example, it's one of the few premium phones that you can buy that incorporates an IR transmitter, which means you can use it for remote control of your TV if that's what suits you. Now, yeah, that's a plus. Not seen in too many phones sold in the Australian market. However, it's also only dual nano SIM compatible with no microSD card expansion, and unusually for a premium phone in Australia, no eSIM capability at all. It's seemingly just not a big thing in China, eSIM that is, so it's not present on this handset if that's important to you. In durability terms, the Poco F7 Ultra is rated as IP68 for water and dust resistant, and as always, that's not a license to take it surfing every day and expect it to survive. On the camera front, now look, while at the time of recording this, the pricing for the Poco F7 Ultra isn't entirely set in stone, it's still clearly playing in the lower end of the premium phone pool price-wise, and that brings with it some significant camera quality expectations. The F7 Ultra packs in a triple rear lens array made up of a 50 megapixel wide sensor, 32 megapixel ultra-wide sensor, and 50 megapixel 2.5 times telephoto sensor, while selfies are handled from a front-facing 32 megapixel sensor, housed in a hole punch at the top center of the display screen. That's not a bad recipe for some decent smartphone quality, and at least there is some level of telephoto lens in play here. Some of those lower premium models do tend to omit it. Actually, Xiaomi takes the telephoto story quite far because it doesn't just top out at 2.5 times, even though that's obviously the native optical presentation of that particular lens. It'll bounce up to as much as 60 times zoom using the usual hybrid digital cropping technique of most phones, but predictably, 60 times. Well, it looks like a dog really, and not a really particularly well-rendered dog at that. As you should totally expect by now, regular daytime lit shots are easily achieved, and it's also not too bad on some more challenging shot types, such as macro shots. Selfie shots are also pretty well handled. The bokeh there is maybe a little bit too aggressively soft by default, but that's a fairly minor argument. Ultimately, this is a decent phone in most conditions. Its low light is not quite up there with the best of the best, but it's certainly appropriate within its price range. On the performance side, there's an interesting challenge here because at the time of recording this, I've only reviewed one other phone that's using the same Snapdragon 8 Elite chipset as the Poco F7 Ultra, and that's the considerably more expensive, undeniably going to be more expensive, Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra. So how do the two phones compare in performance terms? Here's how it stacks up at a CPU level against both the S25 Ultra and a number of phones considerably closer to its price point. Now that's a very good result for the Poco F7 Ultra. While the S25 Ultra is clearly in a performance league of its own right now, you absolutely are paying for that privilege. The F7 Ultra has enough power. And that's a comparison that actually looks even better if we compare GPU benchmark scores using 3DMark's Wildlife Extreme benchmark with one caveat. Let's have a look at those scores first. So that all looks pretty good. The F7 Ultra is not quite the best performing phone, but again, it's right up there for what you're paying for it. So what's the caveat? So here's the caveat. I've had this phone now for about a month, which is a nice long time to test a phone out. So thank you, Xiaomi, for that. However, for the first 3.5 weeks of testing, while 3DMark would install just fine, it would not run. It would consistently throw up an error suggesting it didn't have an internet connection, even when it very, very clearly did. A little online research suggests that this is an ongoing issue with a number of Xiaomi phones, that Xiaomi blocks that particular benchmark at a firmware level from running. Now, obviously you're thinking, but hang on, Alex, you got 3DMark scores. How did you do that? Well, the thing is, after 3.5 weeks, it started working again. And my strong suspicion here is they literally blocked those benchmark scores until they wanted them out there. And while that's annoying to me as a reviewer, it makes it a little bit harder to do my job, it also speaks to a level of control over the phone that I'm not 100% comfortable with, if I'm honest with you. I like to think that if you buy hardware, that hardware is yours to do with, not yours to be dictated to by the manufacturer of that phone. You gave them your money, the hardware should be yours, and that's not really what's happened here, and it makes me really wonder what else is going on behind the modified version of Android that's running on the Poco F7 Ultra. And that's also because while this is running Android 15, it's using a heavily modified version of Android 15, utilizing Xiaomi's HyperOS 2 launcher. Now, that does your usual launcher things of kind of slightly rewriting where certain controls are or what they look like, and some people will like that and some people will find it more challenging. I generally prefer a more plain Android styling myself, but taste can vary there. It also installs a whole bunch of apps on board, and again, this is a very, very common play. In fact, when I reviewed the Poco F6 Pro, it had a whole host of apps, and this phone is not quite that bad, but most of the usual suspects are there. So Booking.com and WPS Office, for example, are there. Though, a rarity, Temu isn't there for the first time in a while. I wonder if the check bounced. You also get Xiaomi's App Mall alternate app store alongside Google Play. And look, just as it was for the Poco F6 Pro, it's stuffed with some really poor quality apps. I'd strongly advise any buyers to stick to Google Play. Google Play isn't perfect either, but it's much less likely to push shovelware or apps with potentially dubious security or privacy implications on you. Another concern here is there's essentially no word on Android OS or security updates for the Poco F7 Ultra at this time, based on the information that Xiaomi has provided to me. It's undeniable that having such a heavily customized launcher like HyperOS 2 does add complexity to managing OS updates, but It's not a great sign when the phone, as at the end of March 2025, is still sitting on the January 2025 security update. Xiaomi packs in a 5,300 mAh battery inside the Poco F7 Ultra, a little larger than your typical 5,000 mAh battery found in most non-folding Android phones right now, but curiously, it's actually smaller than the battery found in the cheaper Poco F7 Pro. That gets a 6,000 mAh battery. An interesting flex on Xiaomi's part there, because you'd typically expect the pricier phone to get the best battery, to get the best features, frankly. Then again, battery capacity is not always a reliable indicator of battery performance. Ultimately, it's how well it handles day-to-day usage, and of course, that varies by user. I've got a whole video on battery testing and battery figures, which you should go and watch. But to give that some comparative context, I put it through my standard YouTube 3-hour battery test, and here's how it compared. There's relatively little to dislike there, and from my more anecdotal testing, as long as you're not pushing heavier duty apps like longer form video recording or premium games too heavily, the standard measure of lasting out a business day is quite easily achievable. The Poco F7 Ultra supports wired charging at up to 150 watts and wireless charging at up to 50 watts, with a charger in the box that was sent to me. Now, for the one that I was sent, it was not an Australian market model charger, of course, and honestly, it's a charger I have not used yet because I'm not 100% certain that it's 100% safe with Australian power supplies. And I say that especially because the Poco F6 Pro had to substitute out the regular Xiaomi charger when it launched here for a lower capacity one to meet our safety standards. This is not stuff I want to muck around with. You only live once and all the rest of it, and I'd rather not die getting electrocuted by a charger, which may or may not, it is untested to be fair to Xiaomi, but which might not be as safe as I would like a charger to be. All of that being said, I have tested it with some higher capacity chargers, and it's been fine, and it charges nice and quickly. No real complaints there. I just want to be clear that I have not used the inbox charger. Your own tolerances may vary on that, and that's totally cool. You also get support for 50-watt wireless charging. I didn't have that charger, and there's no magnetism, there's no Qi 2 kind of fun and games going on here, so you very much need to lay it flat on a wireless charger if you're going to charge it that way. So should you buy the Xiaomi Poco F7 Ultra? Well, this is a tricky one because at a hardware level, I really have very few complaints. Sure, it's not the fastest Android phone, but it's more than powerful enough at an expected price point that makes the hardware a bit of a bargain. But the software side of the equation is a bit more of an open question. It's not clear at all how long it'll be supported for Android updates. HyperOS 2 is very much an acquired taste, and I can't deny that my experiences with apps being blocked doesn't sit well with me at all. I am absolutely in the camp that says if I buy the hardware, I get to decide what I do with it, not the maker of that hardware. Again, your tolerances may vary. And that's my take on the Xiaomi Poco F7 Ultra. What's your thoughts? Hit me up in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and please consider becoming a Patreon or Ko-Fi subscriber.